Hey guys, Jerry here. 1898, this was more than 30 years after the end of the Civil War. And at this point, the U.S. could grant citizenship to whites and blacks. Immigration policy, especially towards Asians, was starting to hit a low. We already had the Chinese Exclusion Treaty of 1880 and the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882. Basically, what these two pieces of legislation did, it made it so unless you were a merchant, a student, or an official government person from China, you couldn't come to America anymore. So it effectively banned any new immigration, permanent that is, of new Chinese people to America. Under all of this, we have United States versus Wong Kim Ark. So who was Wong Kim Ark? In Mandarin, his name is Huang Jin. He was born of a Chinese father and mother. The Chinese father and mother came here and worked in America. Wong Kim Ark was born in 1873, so he was born in the United States. Wong's parents, because they weren't born in America, and at this point, you couldn't become American citizen, naturalization as it's called, you couldn't naturalize into American citizenship unless you were white or black. They went back to China eventually. So Wong Kim Ark, Huang Jin, stayed in America, but visited his parents in China twice. The first time Wong Kim Ark visited his parents in 1890, he came back to America. It was okay, right? Because he had U.S. citizenship. The second time, 1894, he wasn't so lucky. He went back to China. When he returned in 1895, he was detained in the port of San Francisco. And so this is what set off this whole case that eventually went up to the Supreme Court. It took 2 years, but March 5th to March 8th, 1897, this case was argued in the Supreme Court, the U.S. Supreme Court, and a decision was made by March 28th of 1898. So let's talk today about the decision and its repercussions to immigration law and just the interpretation in general of the 14th Amendment. It's fun to look at this Supreme Court case because it shows how young America was at the time. There literally was no precedent for this. Precedent as in cases that the Supreme Court can draw on to determine how stuff has been ruled before. You see, a lot of times when ruling, besides looking at the law, because most laws are vague, you have to look at what's called precedent. How is it ruled by lower courts? How is it ruled by past Supreme Court cases? Precedents, in addition to what the legalese says, in addition, let's be honest, to the Supreme Court justices' personal biases, philosophical standpoints, will determine the interpretation of the law. The 14th Amendment, which was ratified in 1868, says, Section 1, all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof are citizens of the United States and of the state wherein they reside. No state shall make or enforce any law which shall abridge the privileges or immunities of citizens of the United States, nor shall any state deprive any person of life, liberty, or property without due process of law, nor deny to any person within its jurisdiction the equal protection of the laws. We obviously know that our man here, Wong Kim Ark, was born in the United States. So the central debate of this case became, what does subject to the jurisdiction mean? Was our man subject to the jurisdiction of the United States? A perfect example is this. A diplomat, a kid born to a diplomat of another country in America, or let's say a kid that was born to someone that was hostile to America, they probably are not subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. So basically, this entire case became an argument about how do you define subject to the jurisdiction. The case was ruled in favor of Wong Kim Ark by 6-2. So 6 people, the majority, ruled in favor of Wong Kim Ark, said he was a U.S. citizen. You can't abridge his right, can't prevent him from coming back into the United States. 2 people dissented. 2 people in the Supreme Court said he wasn't a U.S. citizen. So let's go over how it ruled. It's really interesting reading the legalese, seeing how Supreme Court justices try to interpret laws. The majority opinion try to look at precedent. How do you determine whether this dude who was born in the U.S., lived in the U.S., had a place in the U.S., he was a U.S. citizen under the jurisdiction of the United States? So they went really deep they looked at British common law, they looked at lower court precedents and everything. So I'm honestly not going to look at it all because I honestly don't even understand it all. But basically, they looked at a lot of British common law because America is still pretty young, man. It's still pretty young till this day. But in the 1800s, America was really young. It literally just fought a civil war to determine if it were to stay America or it would be two Americas. So America's really young, so they had to rely on their, well, older brothers or whatever, the British, to look at some precedent. And I guess British common law precedent said that in our case here, Wong Kim Ark, because he was born in America, he's subject to jurisdiction of the United States as long as he's not like a diplomatic family or whatever. So I find the dissenting argument very interesting. Besides arguing about British common law against the majority, which we'll skip over, I'm going to read to you part of, I think this is actually the crux of their argument. And I want to present it to you guys. You guys process it and debate it in the comments. But here's what the dissenting opinion said. To be completely subject to the political jurisdiction of the United States, completely subject in quotes, is to be in no respect or degree subject to the political jurisdiction of any other government. Now, I take that the children of aliens whose parents have not only not renounce their allegiance to their native country, that was a double negative right there, but are forbidden by its system of government as well as by its positive laws from doing so, and are not permitted to acquire another citizenship by the laws of the country into which they come, must necessarily remain themselves subject to the same sovereignty as their parents, and cannot, in the nature of things, be any more than their parents completely subject to the jurisdiction of such other country. So, generally speaking, I'm continuing quoting, understand the subjects of the Emperor of China, that ancient empire with its history of thousands of years and its unbroken continuity in belief, traditions, and government, in spite of revolutions and changes of dynasty, to be bound to him by every conception of duty and by every principle of their religion, of which phileo, however you say that, piety is the first and greatest commandment, basically obey your father. And formerly, perhaps still, their penal laws denounced the severest penalties on those who renounced their country and allegiance and their abettors, and in effect held the relatives at home of Chinese and foreign lands as hostages for their loyal and whatever concession may have been made by treaty in the direction of admitting the right of expatriation in some sense, they seem in the United States to have remained pilgrims and sojourners as all their fathers were. At all events, they have never been allowed by our laws to acquire a nationality, and except in sporadic instances do not appear ever to have desired to do so. Okay, so basically this is an argument of Jus Sanguinis. It's a Latin term. Basically, what this dissenting opinion's arguing is that in this case, in Wong Kim Ark, he's inheriting his citizenship from his parents because his parents were subjects of the Qing Dynasty, the Qing Chao, right? They did not allow their citizens to become citizens of America. So his parents were citizens of Qing, and he, by inheritance, was a citizen of Qing. That's basically the crux of the dissenting argument. But of course, the majority opinion did not think that way. The majority opinion ruled in a way that would be called Jus Soli. Jus Soli, it's a Latin term also meaning you're born here and you're a citizen. You know, with the exception, of course, of if you're born under a diplomatic type of family. So, but if you're just regular person from another country, another place, and then you are born here in America, you're an American citizen. So that's what this was the first Supreme Court case to really establish this precedent, and this would be used in the future, establishing birthright. So this was Jerry Explores History. I hope you guys liked this little exploration into a often overlooked but very important case in both the U.S.'s immigration policy and how the U.S. treated Asian Americans, Asians, etc. A lot of you might ask what happened to Wong Kim Ark. Well, he stayed in America, and he had sons. 3 of his sons came over from China. Apparently one of Wong's sons even served in World War II. So that's it, man. A little tidbit in American history. Hope you enjoyed this exploration. This was Jerry Explores History. A lot more to come. Bye-bye.